One day, while you were lying down, watching YouTube, imagine someone suddenly appears and offers you one of these two things for free. What would you choose? Why did you pick that? Whatever you chose, you'd probably still wish you had the other one too. But there's a guy out there who's got both at a world-class level. That guy is Warren Buffett, who's just 6 years away from turning 100. He currently has assets worth $235 billion. And just like a doctor who loves doing the exact opposite of what they're supposed to, Buffett has been eating fast food once every morning for 80 years straight and never really exercised. Yet he's kept working without retiring well into his old age. But then, not long ago, he made a surprising confession. Despite having that astronomical fortune of $230 billion, Warren Buffett admits he was a crazy kid from the age of 47. One day, when he went alone to the library, he came across a book titled, The Poor Man Who Earns $1,000, back when he didn't even have a single dollar to his name. Obsessed with the word, $1,000, he borrowed this book and read it over and over until he memorized it. Then, at a family gathering, carrying a little calf on his hip, he made this bold declaration, before I turn 35, I'm going to be a millionaire. Of course, no one in the family took him seriously. But from that moment on, young Buffett started doing some clever things. First, he went to the grocery store that his grandpa ran and spent his entire allowance buying a bunch of gum. Then, he went around the neighborhood knocking on doors, gum in hand. The neighbors, charmed by the little salesman, gladly agreed to buy one piece of gum at a time. But Buffett put on a serious face and said firmly, I don't sell gum individually. I only sell it in bundles. That's my rule. Because of this, the neighbors ended up buying more gum than they had expected, essentially being strong-armed into it. After selling all the gum, Warren Buffett decided to step it up and try something pricier, Coca-Cola. He did it, but this time, instead of forcing sales, he devised a more innovative, more professional way to make money. He went around different supermarkets looking for cola sold cheaply in bundles, bought those colas, and then sold them individually at a higher price. He bought 6 packs for 25 cents and sold each bottle for 5 cents, making a 20% profit per bundle. Using this method to grow his wealth, he then entered the newspaper business. At just 10 years old, he started a newspaper company and confidently promised that, given a customer list, he would increase the number of subscribers. He marked customers' subscription expiration dates on a calendar and visited them just before renewal to persuade them to continue subscribing. Through this, he earned a decent incentive from the newspaper company, and by the age of 14, he had achieved his goal of $1,200. That $1,200 was huge back then, considering that a dollar could buy 20 bottles of cola or 30 chocolate bars. That amount would be worth millions today. It was a considerable sum back then. After making tens of millions of won from selling stamps, Warren Buffett started thinking bigger. Instead of buying the usual items that people his age typically purchased, he began buying land, approximately 50,000 pyong of farmland in remote areas. Then, he got farmers to work the land and started collecting rent from them every month. At just 14, he was already a landlord making rental income. This was the first time Warren Buffett realized that his assets could generate revenue for him without his having to work. But the real big cash came from a different story, the famous pinball machine incident. One day, Warren and a friend went to get a haircut. The barbershop was packed, so while waiting, an idea suddenly popped into his head. On the way there, he'd seen a used pinball machine for just $25. He remembered the machine. Warren Buffett immediately went out and bought a pinball machine. Then came back to the barbershop and made the owner an offer. I'll set up this pinball machine here for free to entertain your bored customers. How about we split the profits 50-50? From the barber's perspective, it was a no-brainer, no upfront cost and suddenly extra income coming in. People who were bored waiting started flocking to the pinball machine, and coins steadily piled up inside. Warren Buffett now had another stream of income just by sitting back. Even better, thanks to the pinball machine, business at the barbershop picked up. Other barbershop owners heard about this and came running to Warren Buffett, asking him to install pinball machines at their shops too. So, Warren bought more machines and officially launched his business. From that point on, the money flowing into Warren Buffett's pockets started growing exponentially. This was the moment. He said that the thrill of just sitting back and watching money roll in every month changed his life. Before he knew it, Warren Buffett graduated from high school and had assets worth hundreds of millions in today's money. Even as a minor, he had already surpassed his parents' wealth. Because of this, he didn't have to ask his parents for college tuition and even managed to graduate early. He finished college at just 19 and kept the momentum going by heading to graduate school, where he met a lifelong mentor, Professor Benjamin Graham. This professor was a top investment expert and the author of The Intelligent Investor, which, along with 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000, was one of Warren Buffett's favorite books. Warren looked up to him like an idol and learned many investment skills under his guidance. You can tell how much Warren admired this professor by what he did after graduation. He didn't work for some other company. I begged Professor Graham to let me work at his investment firm, but he said I was too expensive for their company and turned me down. Then, Warren Buffett offered to work for free, begging them to give him a chance. Seeing someone so eager to join, the professor smiled warmly but suddenly turned serious. He said, "Why are you so clueless? There are adult reasons why we can't hire you." Then he explained the real reason, which was like a bolt from the blue for Buffett. He wasn't Jewish. At that time, Jewish people dominated American finance, and discrimination was even more blatant than today. So it was tough for non-Jews to get hired in finance. Because Jews had faced discrimination for so long, they stuck together tightly and looked out for each other. Professor Graham was Jewish, and his firm mainly consisted of Jewish employees. So, in the end, Warren Buffett couldn't get a job at the company he wanted. He ends up going back to his hometown. When Warren Buffett returned home, he fatefully ran into someone for the first time, a woman named Susan. Their first meeting took place 3 years ago. At that time, Buffett had gone to deliver homemade food from his mother to his younger sister, who was living in a college dorm. But as he was leaving his sister's place, he was instantly smitten by a woman who happened to be his sister's roommate, Susan. After that, Warren found any excuse to drop by his sister's dorm as often as he could. He'd suddenly show up, offering to fix any broken furniture or electronics to win Susan's favor. However, what Warren didn't realize was that Susan already had a boyfriend at the time. So she kept her distance, and Warren decided to shift his attention away from Susan to someone else, Susan's father. Right then, Susan's dad was playing the ukulele and mandolin. They discovered that she had a passion for playing music. Warren Buffett purposely got close to Susan's dad and would visit him every evening to play music together. He was subtly trying to impress him as a potential future son-in-law. Susan's parents liked Warren Buffett, and Susan herself started to take an interest in Warren, who treated her parents so well. Eventually, his plan to win over her dad worked perfectly. After Susan broke up with her boyfriend, she finally opened her heart to Warren Buffett, and before long, they ended up getting married. At that time, Warren was 21 and Susan was 19. After a lot of effort, he succeeded in marrying her, but Warren's burning love soon shifted to someone else, not Susan, but his idol from graduate school, Professor Graham. A few years earlier, Professor Graham had declined to hire Warren. But now he felt remorseful about that decision and reached out, offering Warren a job at his company. If it were you, a Jew. She said it was okay not to be perfect. Warren Buffett immediately left without looking back and went to New York to work under Professor Graham, learning securities analysis. From that point on, Buffett fully opened his eyes to stocks, and his wealth started to grow like a snowball. By the time he was just 31, he had amassed what would be worth about $14 million today. But even though he was so rich, his wife, Susan, wasn't exactly happy with how things were. She felt her husband was spending way too much time on work and was growing distant from her and the kids. She even started to wonder if there was another woman in the picture. Then, something happened that shook Susan's trust. Rumors began spreading that Warren had been seeing a mistress for 4 years. The woman was Katharine Graham, the chairwoman of the Washington Post, one of the largest newspapers in the U.S. They had grown close during the time Warren Buffett was buying up large shares of the Washington Post stock, meeting often for business, and naturally became close. However, their business relationship became so close that Warren Buffett started leaving a few sets of his clothes at Katharine's house. They didn't even try to hide how close they were. According to Warren Buffett's official biography, The Snowball, Katharine would openly hand Warren the keys to her house, even when there were lots of people around. Naturally, this made Warren's wife, Susan, suspicious. But Warren just said they were good friends who got along well. Susan believed him. After all, Katharine was 23 years older than Warren, so Susan didn't think her husband would see her as anything more than a friend. Still, Susan did something bold that surprised everyone. She wrote Katharine a handwritten letter, saying she fully supported their friendship, that the two of them made each other happier, and that they should feel free to see each other as much as they wanted. She sent a letter, acting as if she didn't have a care in the world. However, that letter ultimately led to a significant disaster. Katharine, who got the letter, went around showing it off to everyone. She bragged that she now had the main wife's blessing and used the letter as a free pass to spend more time with Warren. Susan, who had sent that cool, nonchalant letter, quickly fell deep into trouble. Of course, there was no real proof they were anything more than just friends, but after getting Susan's letter, Warren seemed more at ease and stopped holding back, spending even more time with Katharine. That made Susan start feeling jealous and insecure. Even before all this, Susan had felt like her husband was from a different world. When he came home talking about stocks, she couldn't follow, and he knew it too, so he rarely talked shop at home. But Katharine was different. She'd been on an elite path since she was young and grew up in the U.S. The chairman of a large newspaper company, Dan Guy Keoyoung, had numerous social connections and was a woman who could instantly understand Warren Buffett's diary. Because of that, she felt like Katharine was more of a proper support to her husband, both professionally and emotionally, than she was. She felt pretty insignificant just staying at home every day, taking care of the house. After even sending a letter that seemed to acknowledge their relationship, Suja thought there was no turning back, like crossing a point of no return. So, she packed her bags and started living separately from her husband. She headed off to faraway San Francisco, where she dreamed of a new life as a singer, something she'd always wanted before becoming a housewife. When Warren Buffett found out his wife had left, he finally hit himself in the chest with regret, calling it the biggest mistake of his life. He skipped meals and didn't even bother dressing appropriately psychologically. He completely fell apart during that time. Suja eventually lost her dream of being a singer in San Francisco. She released a CD album and performed frequently, traveling between major cities. At that time, Suja began living with a man 9 years her senior, whom she knew as a tennis coach, while still not divorced from Warren Buffett. It seemed like her marriage to Warren Buffett was entirely over. Still, Suja had some lingering feelings for her husband. When she heard that he was so devastated he couldn't even handle simple chores, she called a friend named Astrid and asked her to stop by occasionally to check on Warren and make sure he was eating and doing okay. However, this request ultimately sparked a real soap opera. It happened during the university break when Warren Buffett's kids came home to see their dad after a long time. They found a strange woman in their dad's bedroom, Astrid, their mom's friend. The friend who had once supported Suja in her tough times had somehow become involved with Warren, and they were now living together. The kids were initially shocked but soon came to accept the situation naturally. Their mom, Suja, genuinely. Because they were rooting for it, from Susan's point of view, she was already seeing someone new, and with Buffett. They were just legally married but practically separated. So, Susan genuinely hoped that instead of her workaholic husband being distant at home, someone would be there to take good care of him. And that's how this strange love triangle started. It was kind of like two families under one roof. When Otsuka sent out Christmas cards on behalf of the Warren Buffett family to their friends, he included the names Warren Buffett, Susan Buffett, and Astrid, all three on the same card. Even though they were each seeing new people, Warren and Susan still showed up together as a couple for critical official events. And when they went on family trips with their kids, the two of them were together. At times like that, Astrid would step aside for them. Buffett once said about this unusual relationship with these two women, "Yusan made me who I am today, and Astrid keeps me that way." After that, Warren Buffett was in a love triangle for a whopping 27 years. And only after his first wife passed away from a brain hemorrhage at an early age did he remarry Astrid. Their wedding was anything but flashy for the world's second richest man at the time. It was a simple affair held in the living room of their eldest daughter's small apartment, about 17 pyong, roughly 560 square feet, with just a handful of close friends invited. Warren Buffett is famous for his frugality, which is quite unusual for someone of his wealth. One well-known story is about his Samsung phone. Even though he's Apple's largest shareholder, he stubbornly used a 20,000 won Samsung feature phone, a model that was way out of style for a full 10 years, which reportedly upset Apple. Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, even gifted him iPhones multiple times and personally visited his home to try to convince him how to use one. But Buffett stuck to his Samsung phone until a decade later, when he finally switched to an iPhone. Even then, he reportedly didn't bother to learn all the smartphone features and still uses it just for calls. He's also known for being super thrifty when it comes to meals. For example, on days when the stock market goes up. They say on days when the stock price drops, he opts for the $2 hamburger menu instead of the $3 one. Additionally, he always makes sure to take advantage of discounts and coupons. When he went to Hong Kong with Gates, he took him to McDonald's and said he'd treat him, then pulled out coupons to pay. Watching him like this, you'd see he's super careful with money even with his kids. One day, his eldest daughter was in the car with him and needed to pay $20 in cash for parking. Since she didn't have any money, she asked her dad sitting next to her for $20. But Warren Buffett said he'd only give her the money if she wrote him a check. He never hands out money for free, not even $20. But even more terrifying for his kids than the $20 incident was when he announced he'd give away 99% of his wealth to society. At that time, Warren told his kids about the money he'd leave them. He said he'd go just enough so they could do something with it, but not enough so they'd be able to do nothing at all. Here's what happened. Each of the kids ended up getting just $100,000, which is about 1.4 million. That's a tremendous amount of money, no doubt. But considering their dad's fortune was around $235 billion, it's understandable they might feel a bit shortchanged. Either way, the kids had no choice but to accept their dad's decision without complaint. But then, someone in the family caught everyone off guard with Warren Buffett's fortune. One day, Warren was watching TV and was shocked to see a woman on screen. It was his granddaughter, Nicole. She was being interviewed on the Oprah Winfrey Show, a hugely popular talk show in the U.S. On the show, Nicole openly complained about her grandpa not giving her any money. At the time, Nicole, in her 30s, wasn't receiving any financial support from Warren, as has adhered to principles. As a result, after graduating from art school, she struggled financially and ended up working as a housekeeper for a wealthy family. Nicole couldn't understand how she, a granddaughter from our wealthy family, was working a housekeeper for another even more affluent family, and she discussed how challenging her situation was. She kept making statements that sounded like she was stuck in an entitled mindset, acting as if she wasn't satisfied. When Oprah, the host, asked if she was going to ask her grandpa for some money, Nicole said she had asked for some spending money on a high school trip once, but her grandpa refused, saying it might make other kids feel uncomfortable. She said she figured he wouldn't give her any money this time either. Warren Buffett saw this interview and got angry. From his perspective, he couldn't help but feel betrayed because Nicole wasn't even his biological granddaughter. She was the daughter that his son's wife brought from a previous marriage. In other words, Warren had no blood relation to her. Still, because she was the child of the woman his son loved, Warren accepted Nicole as his granddaughter. Even after his son and that woman divorced, making Nicole and Warren practically strangers, Warren continued to support her, covering her school and living expenses until she graduated from college, just as he had done for his other grandchildren. It wasn't until then that all financial support was cut off. Anyway, Warren was furious over his granddaughter's sudden outburst, and right after the broadcast, he sent Nicole a letter cutting her off completely. The letter was incredibly blunt, essentially saying, "You're no longer part of my family," and at the end, instead of signing "Grandpa" as before, he wrote "Warren." That's how final it was. Nicole regretted it and quickly tried to send a reply, but Warren never changed his mind. Nicole now makes a living selling her paintings as an artist. Lately, she has been active as an influencer in the crypto and NFT world, still going by the title, the one Warren Buffett cut ties with, and has appeared on various shows. As for Warren Buffett, in May of this year, at the age of 44, he officially announced his retirement, making him one of the oldest retirees in human history. Looking back at Warren Buffett's life, it's clear that he wasn't born with a silver spoon, but rather a fortune through hard work. Most of the world's richest people come from middle or lower class backgrounds, just like Buffett. So, what sets smart rich people apart? The book points out that what all these wealthy people have in common is a concept known as healthy selfishness. But this kind of selfishness isn't the negative kind we usually think of. For example, like the safety instructions flight attendants give during a plane crash: put your oxygen mask on before helping the person next to you. You need to be okay first to be able to help others. Healthy selfishness is the skill of taking good care of yourself for a bigger purpose. This book primarily teaches you how to manage your finances effectively. It shares money management tips from rich people like Warren Buffett. One chapter discusses the difference between being cheap and being thrifty, and reading it resonated with me, because I often lose my composure when I see those buy two get one free deals in stores. Additionally, for someone like me, who's always tempted by fast delivery and loves opening packages, that 72-hour rule before making online purchases was a golden nugget. By the time you finish the book, you're left wondering, so what made these smart, wealthy people different? Well, it was precisely this. It's not just about making money unthinkingly, but getting rich strategically. If you want to learn more about the strategies and principles of wealthy people, check out the bookstore link in the pinned comment.